We're here with another episode of Cold Email Breakdown, and I'm joined again by Josh for this episode. Now, before we get started, we can just introduce ourselves because most people watching this probably have no idea who we are. I'll start with myself. So, my name's George. I'm founder of Email Chaser, which is a cold email sending platform. And, Josh, if you don't mind letting everyone know who you are.
I'm Josh Michaels. I'm the founder of Three Red Boxes, a email pretty much outreach specialist agency. We do deliverability and audits also, but we specialize in full managed outreach.
Thanks. And so anyone watching this who needs help with their cold email campaign, so Josh's company is definitely the place to go. So I'm going to put his LinkedIn profile in the description of this video so you can reach out to him if needed. And just before we started recording this, we were talking about the whole topic of out of office replies. And Josh, you were saying that you had a client who received, I don't know how much, over 80 out of office replies in a day or something because it was the day before Thanksgiving. So if you maybe we should start there.
Yeah, so I had a client last year who was concerned that we were going to spam. I know there's a lot of inbox testing platforms you could use. We can talk about those later, but he was concerned that we were going to spam because we weren't getting the reply rate that he wanted. We were seeing a good open rate, but that could be deceiving. So this was not a fully managed client. It was just consulting. I had warned him around major holidays like Thanksgiving that we should actually turn off campaigns. One, hopefully nobody's reading emails, take a couple of days off. And two, you're going to trigger a lot of out of office replies, which in most sending platforms puts them back in the queue somewhere. It could be 7 days, 14 days, whatever it is. But this client who was highly concerned that he was going to spam didn't shut down his campaign. It was the day before Thanksgiving. We sent about 200 emails out that day, and we got 85 out of office replies, which is probably the highest reply rate I've ever seen. Most platforms don't count them as your reply rate, but if you look at the out of office replies and you look at the email addresses and the domains behind them, you can look up which mailboxes, which providers you're inboxing, right? I mean, it's a live action test. Probably not the best way to test it, but a little bit of a secret in the industry. I can go in those 85 different domains that we hit. I looked up the MX record. I looked up which providers we were sending to. I was able to see this was a B2B client that we were landing very consistently at Google Workspace, at Office 365, at Proofpoint, and some of the other filters. So it's a very positive sign to me that we're inboxing, right? Again, probably not the best way to test something to turn on during a holiday, but during the course of your campaign, people take vacations, people take days off. Use those out of office replies as a live action test. It's a way to know if you're landing someone. No, it's not universal. Just because you got one out of office from Office 365 doesn't mean you're landing across the board there, but it's a really good positive sign. It's a way to do a live test and know what's going on, what's actually happening when you send these emails out the door.
Yeah. Hey, I agree with that. I'd actually say probably real out of office replies is maybe more of an accurate indicator that you're landing in the primary inbox than a lot of these email placement tools, which it's kind of hard to know how accurate those are just because they are technically using real email accounts, but those email accounts are not necessarily representative of the real accounts that you have in the real world in terms of age and distribution. So I think out of office emails are actually not a bad thing. It's just part of the game and can be a positive sign. Yeah, and then
See that? Sorry, George. Something I forgot to mention that we were talking about that I think we skipped is the only way to get an out of office reply is to be in the inbox, right? The only way it will trigger, for those of you that set your out of office, the only way it triggers is if the email actually hits your inbox. So if it hits a spam folder, a junk folder, something else, it's not going to trigger that out of office. So if you look at Gmail, especially, you know, those promotion folders, those social folders, those updates folders, Office 365, the junk folder, you're not going to get those out of office replies. They don't trigger because Google Office, they don't want to trigger. They don't want to give any kind of positive sign on something that's going to a spam folder or a junk folder. I don't know. I don't know if anybody knows. I don't think out of office replies are a tremendous positive signal to the ISPs, to give them, you could probably cheat the system, send it to a whole bunch of people, turn out of office on, but it is a signal, right? And it's knowing that you're in the inbox is the only way that it actually triggers the out of office.
Yeah, and pretty much all cold email sending tools like Email Chaser allow you to edit follow-up settings, and we have an update coming in the next 1 to 2 weeks where it's going to allow the user to basically edit all settings related to follow-up emails. But one of those settings in particular is related to out-of-office emails. So you're going to be able to choose if you receive an out-of-office email from a lead, do you want to still continue sending follow-up emails to that lead, or do you want to cancel the follow-ups? Obviously, the default behavior is just to keep sending the follow-up emails, but that's going to be something we're going to be pushing in the next 1 to 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think it's really nice when the platforms basically just put that person back in the queue and wait 7 days, 10 days, 14 days. I don't know if AI is ever going to get intelligent enough to actually read the out of office reply and say, oh, this person's out of office for 3 days, so I'll wait that amount of time. I don't know if it's that dire importance, but it is nice that when it has a default, like you were saying, that automatically it waits 7 days. Maybe that's something you can go in and edit in the settings. So if you want to be more careful and you always want to wait 10 days or 14 days, you can. But it is definitely a nice feature when it kind of pauses that contact and waits, hopefully waits for the out of office to no longer be on.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah. Technically, you could definitely build some kind of system which would read the out of office email, and then from there you can sort of determine when to send the follow up email. It is technically possible, but it always comes back to the question of does it really matter? Because 95% of people when they go on vacation is probably for about a week or something. So as long as you're sending your follow up email a week later or whatever, it doesn't. Yeah, the results probably won't vary much, and I think that's kind of an interesting to think about thing to think about, where a lot of people like to focus in cold email on these sort of minute details that don't necessarily really move the needle, instead of focusing on all the things that actually do matter. And I'm not saying this is you, obviously, but just in general, they'll think about like how many days should you wait between a follow up email instead of thinking about, well, is my lead list actually any good, and is what I'm selling something that people even want? And those are the things that really make all the difference. Just for anyone watching, always ask the important questions and try not to spend too much time on things that are not necessarily that important.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there is an answer for the perfect content or the perfect sequence. Or do you send 2 emails or 4 emails, or how do you wait 2 days between, 3 days between? I don't think there is a specific answer, and I don't think it's even true in the same industry. If I had two clients doing the exact same thing, I don't know if one of them sending a 3 email sequence with a 2 or 3 day wait, the other one wanting to send only two, would get the same, pros and cons. I mean, it's to me, a lot of the stuff that you're talking about, those smaller little things that people get stuck on, is all just about testing. Once you get the system up and running, once you know your ICP, get your targeted lead, who you're looking for, you have your system built correctly, it's warming correctly, you're ready to go. You ramp it up slowly. Please don't just turn it on at 50 or 100 a day. Ramp it up slowly. Your first 30 days is just about building your scale, right? Getting from 0 to 100, whatever that goal is for the mailbox. And then you start looking at your analytics, right? Run A/B tests on subject lines, run A/B test on content, run A/B test on a 2 day wait versus 3 day, run A/B test on a 2 email sequence versus four. Most platforms will show you how each step of the sequence is doing. So you can see if there's a huge drop off, maybe not in open rates, but in click or reply rates. Maybe email 4 is just kind of a waste and nobody's replying to it. It's one more email in the sequence. If you're not getting conversions, take it out. It's not helping you in any way. And it's just, to me, it's all about tweaking stuff. A/B test, you test one thing at a time, right? If you try to test the subject line and the content and your CTA and the days between, you don't know which one of them actually helped you or hurt you, right? So I always start by just testing subject lines. It's the easiest thing to test. Run 200, 500, 1,000 through the system, find your better subject lines, then you move on to testing your CTAs, your content, and you move on to testing, how many days in between email. Is it 2 days? Is it 3 days? Does it honestly, I don't know, like George was saying, if that really matters that much. A lot of people get stuck on it. A lot of clients I've talked to are like, oh, it has to be 3 days. It's what works. And if they could show me proof of that, fantastic. I don't know if I've ever actually seen proof of that, but it's those little things are all testing things. They're all little things to test, little things to work on as you go. But like George was saying, find the right means, find the highly targeted people, find the people who are interested in what you're trying to sell, what you're trying to get in the door, you're trying to talk to. That is 80% of outreach these days, is taking the time, the energy, the money to find the correct people to start that conversation.
Yeah. And yeah, on that topic of, what works and what doesn't work, I think a really common theme I've seen where people who send cold emails but don't get any results is they're just sort of selling things that really are either super saturated or just there isn't much demand for. So you might be selling some kind of service which services are great, but there might be a type of service you're selling which no one really cares about. And then you can compare that to maybe you're selling a physical item, some kind of like specialized physical pump system that can, save a certain type of company in an industry. Yeah, who knows how much money. But the point is, that's a very important, interesting thing which no one else is sending emails about. And if you hit the right people with that kind of message, like they're gonna reply to you. So I just think there's these sort of more fundamental things people should think about. And if you are selling something that sucks and no one wants, then you should pivot and change what you sell, because cold email is just the sort of channel at which you communicate with people, but what you're selling is really important.
Yeah, and it's hard, right? Because everybody who starts their own company, starts their own business, starts their own product, thinks that theirs is the best. But like you said, sometimes you have to pivot. Sometimes you have to, be honest with yourself. And maybe it's not your deliverability. Maybe it's not your content. Maybe it's not the people you're hitting. Maybe it is what you're selling. I've worked with people that have had great products. Some products are really, really hard to sell, whether it's email outreach, SMS, whatever it is. I mean, I worked with a client that built their own CRM. It was a fantastic platform. But how do you get large companies to let go of the CRM that they've been using for however long, right? You have a lot of people involved in using that, even if it's not the best. It's what they've been using. It's what they know. And yes, you can put in the email, hey, come see a demo, come see this, but it's a hard sell, right? There's other things that are just harder sells. If you can find a niche area, a very targeted, like you were saying, something that these people really need that either they don't have, it makes their job faster, cleaner, easier, cheaper, one of those things, right? It makes it a lot easier. I like working with clients that have a higher value proposition. It's a lot easier to make, for me, to make 4 or 5 deals a week when you're talking about 5 figures plus, than to try to sell something that's a couple dollars at a time, or $5 at a time. It's a very, very hard sell in outreach. Again, I know George, you and I've talked about this a lot. I don't believe that outreach is selling at all. I don't try to sell through outreach. I try to start conversation. I try to get my foot in the door. I just want you to reply and say you're interested, or let's talk, or tell me more. That's it. I think the days of trying to actually sell products through whatever that product is through a cold email, I honestly believe those days are done.
Yeah, I don't know where people got that idea that cold email was supposed to be some kind of like direct response marketing method. Yes, like it's not a Facebook ad that funnels someone to a landing page. No, it's to start a conversation, and then once this conversation starts, you then go from there. But it's not some kind of direct push. And maybe there's some situations where that can work, but in general, it's just not really the best strategy.
And you also have to think about, when you're building the strategy that you're doing, think about who you're emailing, right? Are you emailing younger adults? Are you emailing middle age? Are you emailing older adults? Are you emailing certain industries? There's a lot of people out there, especially older adults that don't trust links in emails, no matter what it is. I mean, it can be your domain, branded, who you are, all this stuff. And there's a lot of people that just don't want to ever click on a link because they think all their information is going to get stolen, right? No matter who it is. So sometimes just adding a link, even if it's for booking an appointment. I actually had someone write me back who knew me, one on one person that I had talked to before, that said, I sent him a Calendly link to book a meeting with me. And he said, I don't click on those. I had some malware downloaded on my computer one time for clicking on something that looked like an appointment link. Now I no longer do it. So sometimes think about who you're emailing, think about what works better. I generally don't put links in there because even if somebody is interested in what you're doing, don't make it harder for them to actually convert, right? If they're scared of a link, they don't want to click something, you're now taking a product, a person that you could have talked to, a person that you could have gone forward with, and put a impediment, something in front of them to stop them from talking to you.
Yeah. And also, you as the person who's reaching out to them, it's sort of your responsibility to set up that meeting yourself. So, when you send them that Calendly link, for all the reasons you just described, why people don't want to click them in the first place, it's also sort of sending a little bit of a wrong message, in my opinion. It's a lot. People are more receptive when you say something like, "Hey, would you like to, do a call on Thursday or Friday at 2 or 3 p.m. U.S. Central, whatever," and then they reply yes, and then you just send them the invitation, so you can send them the Google Calendar invitation, for example, without them having to click anything. I mean, that's just a much more well received format, and there might be other ways of doing it as well, but yeah, links are not always the best strategy.
Something I learned from a fellow colleague of mine a couple years ago, who was one of the best designers and conversion people as far as web pages goes. He was always telling me when we were working together that the more steps you put in front of a person, even if they're easy, the more chance you have of losing them, right? We're all used to filling out a book appointment, right? Your name, your email usually fills in automatically. You pick the date, you pick the time. I mean, it's not a hard process. But think about it. You have to get the person to open an email. You have to get them to click the email. You have to get the page to load, hopefully correctly. Then you actually have to get them to pick a time and a date, which means they have to go back and look at their calendar to make sure they're available at that time and date if it's not synced correctly. Then you have to get them to put in their name, their email. That's a lot of steps. I know it doesn't sound that hard, but think about how many steps that is. That's close to 8, 9, 10 steps for someone to do versus just like you were saying, put something in that says, hey, if you want to talk, write me back or tell me when is good for you. Or if you're interested, let's talk.
It's one step. We'll just respond yes Thursday, and then just
Right.
yeah.
That I know replies are harder to get than it clicks sometimes. A lot of people have that idea. I don't believe in that. I believe if your content is good, if your ask is simple, soft selling kind of thing, it's easy to get someone to just click and say, yes, I'm interested. Yes, let's talk. Or yes, whatever, you know, give me more information versus having to go through 8, 9, 10 steps to get the same process. And maybe you got a booked meeting faster, maybe, but does the person even show up? That's the other part of it. So there's a lot of steps in there that to a lot of people seem fairly simple. I'll just get all the book meetings all day long. It's not always that simple.
Yeah. Yeah, and sort of on a related note to getting people to reply to you, like maybe you have different experience than I do, so feel free to share us if you do. But in my own campaigns, I've noticed that if you try to provide some kind of educational content, for example, it doesn't usually get the same amount of replies compared to if you just say a very clear value proposition as to why what you're doing or offering is a lot better compared to whatever they're currently doing. So if you email someone, you say something like, "Hey, do you want me to send you this article about XYZ?" You'll get some replies, but from what I've seen in my campaigns, those kinds of emails get a lot less replies compared to if it's sort of a very clear benefit to them and also a really great offer. Sort of not a hard sell, but kind of just more sort of focused on what's the benefit to them. Uh, you know, a lot of people are busy, so the whole educational angle doesn't always work with everyone.
Yeah. You're trying to say, like, I have a one pager PDF Do you want it to be more educated on what I do? Or here, a lot of people like to send demo videos or click this to see a demo video. I've seen some of those work in very specific industries. Like if you have a SaaS product, sometimes, showing a demo of how cool your product is can be helpful. But again, different people have little bit different strategies in cold email. Some people want to go after like pain points. Some people want to go after like curiosity. To me, it's kind of a mixture of all of those, right? It depends on the industry, depends on who I'm targeting. But again, my goal is to tell you how I'm going to make your life simpler, easier, cheaper. Let's talk. I'll do it for you.
Yeah. I'm reading something here from someone who posted something about they're looking for someone to do cold email outreach for them, and they basically sell some kind of online coaching service. I feel like that's one of those examples of like maybe it works for some people, but yeah, that's the kind of service which if you're trying to sell that by cold email, it's just gonna be tough because how many people really want online coaching, and then out of those people, how many of them are going to trust a random person they've never met by email? It's a kind of I feel like those are the kinds of things which are just hard to really have success with.
I look at industries, clients, what they're selling, what they're doing, and I almost think about like a reverse ICP, right? If I was on the other side, would I want to read this email? Would I trust this person? And at the same time, like, who does that person who wants to sell coaching, how do they figure out who to target, right? You can't just download every CEO in the United States and send them an email, right? You really have to think about if that's going to work. You have to think about who are you able to help the most? What industry, what job level, what niche, what has worked for you before? If you go back and look at your clients, what areas have you really been able to help people that you have case studies that you know it works, you know their language, you know what they're doing. And then if you want to do cold outreach, you start there. You can't just go into some of these applications where you download contacts or, and say, I want everybody to C-suite level above a $5 million revenue. It doesn't work. You have to be so specific. You have to look for signals and keywords on their website and their LinkedIn, what they do. Again, I would tell that person, you know, find one or two tiny little targeted niches that work for you. You know that you've had clients that it's gone well. You feel comfortable in those niches. You know that it works, not just in the industry, not just saying every SaaS CEO, but be specific. Be as specific as you possibly can. Narrow that list from 50,000 down to 500. And then work on those 500 people and see how it goes. If you start to get some traction, look for another ICP, look for another niche. If you don't, like George was saying, maybe you pivot. There's a lot of other platforms to use. You could use LinkedIn, you can use PPC ads, you can use Facebook, you can use so many different ways to do what cold email does. Not every product, not every sale is appropriate for cold.
Yeah, and it is two ways to pivot. You might pivot your offer, what you're selling, but you also might pivot your outreach method. So, if you dial in the ICP and you only have, 400 businesses that actually make sense for whatever you're selling, well, maybe cold email isn't the best. I mean, there might still be some room there to mix it in, but maybe it makes more sense to buy 400 pizzas, custom cardboard boxes with pizza. You deliver them to the 400 offices of those businesses. And then, a few days after you deliver the pizza with a handwritten note, you then send a cold email to the CEO of whatever those companies are. And then from there, you set up a meeting. Yeah, that might be a better strategy. It just depends on the situation.
Find what avenue those people are looking at every day. If it's Instagram, if it's Facebook, if it's LinkedIn, if it's email, whatever that is, like you said. And sometimes you have to go and think creatively, right? Maybe I love that idea of sending, inside the pizza box a note, or you put your branding out, go to a local pizzeria that these companies buy pizza from for their whole company. Maybe they have a Wednesday pizza party or something. Or maybe you buy them a Wednesday pizza party and you spend $100 to send them 4 or 5 pizzas to their company and you brand the box and send it to them. I mean, there's so many ways in marketing to be creative and to get in the door with people. Sometimes that's cold email, sometimes that's sending 4 or 5 pizzas to a company. It costs money to make money, right? You're not going to just sit there and spend $5 and hope somebody knocks on your door and says, I want to be a client. I know George has done a lot of marketing out there. He's all over the place doing videos and LinkedIn marketing and all these things, and not just sitting back waiting for people to find you. They're constantly improving their platform. They're constantly improving their website. They're constantly doing stuff to bring people, or you can't just sit back and wait.
Yeah, and uh, I know this sort of cold email breakdown series is primarily about cold email, but whilst we're sort of talking about marketing, yeah, in my experience, yeah, I found that usually there's one or two things that dramatically outperform whatever else you're doing, and if you find that one or two things that's working really well, and in my opinion, you should just double down on those things and try not to get distracted by everything else. Because a lot of people think that they have to do everything. They think they have to be posting on every social media platform every day, and they have to be doing social media, cold email, LinkedIn, just like everything. But sometimes you find that one thing, and that one thing might not be obvious. It might be something that no one else is doing. But when you find it, just really dial in and just go crazy on that because you're going to get a lot of results. But then, there's the other side of that, which is your product needs to be ready. I mean, in the context of email chaser, our product's not even ready right now. So, we're purposely not increasing the margin at the moment. And we do some stuff, we do these episodes and we do some stuff on LinkedIn, but, we're purposely not trying to expand distribution right now because the product just isn't there yet. But yeah, 6 to 12 months when it is there, that's when we're really going to 10x everything. So yeah, the same principles apply to pretty much any business.
Absolutely. I mean, I went from being the head of marketing for a company where it was a smaller company, and I worked on Google PPC, I worked on Facebook ads, I worked on affiliate marketing, I worked on email marketing, I worked on a bunch of different things, and it was a struggle because we were a smaller company. We didn't have dedicated people to every one of those, so I was having to either use the knowledge I have, learn new knowledge, get help. But I learned that it's hard for me, be honest with myself, to try to run with a small company with nobody else underneath me, to try to run 5 or 6 or 7 different divisions. So eventually I fell into just email marketing, and eventually I fell into doing what I'm doing now, specializing in outreach. I enjoyed it. I did it myself for a company for a while. I learned a lot of the ins and outs of it, and now I'm helping other people do it. And that's to me, I got more and more and more targeted as my marketing experience over time changed, right? Instead of, like you're saying, instead of trying to advertise everywhere, instead of trying to do everything, do what you do well. You know, email chasers working on an outreach platform that's going to be fantastic. They're not trying to be they're not trying to beat major MTAs and ESPs and beat Sendinblue and Brevo and MailChimp and be a opted in, double opt in marketing platform. It's a different concept, right? If you try to do too many things at once, and I've seen other email platforms do that, where they try to just do everything in one place, and it's very difficult. Do what you do well. It's a motto for everything in life, right? Do what you do well. It's easier to do. It's more fun to do. Perfect what you do. Make it better. You could always add things to it. You could add bells and whistles, but everything that I see George building revolves around doing outreach, whether it's validating emails, whether it's finding leads, whatever is in his UI or his platform, is the basics of it are around outreach. He's not trying to build an SMS platform on top of it. He's not trying to build, a Facebook ad platform on top. Maybe in 5 years, he'll start to add some more stuff. But right now, he's trying to make it the best he can with what he has.
Yeah, I mean, even in 5 years, we're probably still going to be very much focused on sort of outbound B2B sales. It's just the thing is especially from a sort of a messaging perspective, uh, it's not really well, it's extremely difficult to have a website or product where the messaging is consistent. If you're trying to do absolutely everything, putting aside the fact that trying to build everything is not even possible unless you've raised hundreds of millions of dollars, but let's put that aside. Even just the messaging part, you can't have a consistent message about who you are, what you offer, what you solve if you're doing everything. It's all over the place.
Yeah, the hardest clients that I've had to do outreach for are the ones that do try to do everything, right? They're in the marketing world or in the SaaS world, and they got 8 different products that they merged into one. Like you're saying, how do you market that? You have to market one. I do one thing really, really well. Everything around it is associated to that one thing. Like we were saying, bee finder, hygiene, mailbox rotation, whatever that is, but it's all around B2B outreach. That's something that you can market. That's something that people need. It's something you can improve on. It's an easier thing. Even if you wanted to do cold outreach, it's an easier thing to sell than we do these 5 other things over here and we do everything in house.
Yeah, and what you just said there, I think, is a really important point that the vast majority of people completely misunderstand, which is saying that you specialize in one thing doesn't mean that you only have one feature. That one thing, that one specialization doesn't mean one feature. It just means once or industry or niche that you're in. For example, B2B outbound sales, for example. But within that, obviously there might be 5 to 10 features you have to build because to solve that entire problem, you got to find the leads, you got to find the emails, you got to verify them, you got to send. There's a lot of stuff going on. But um, don't be the person who makes the mistake of thinking that means one feature, because then you just build something which has one feature which doesn't actually solve the whole problem, and then you get smoked by the competition who has every single feature and they solve the problem in this whole self.
I definitely agree with that. It's and you have to have versions, right? You're going to have version 1.0, you're going to have version 2.0, you're going to have version 47 eventually, right? And you're not making it better, but think about what it is that you do. Email Chaser is a B2B outreach platform. When I do as a deliverability consultant, when I work with my clients, the things that I need to do to make the outreach work, we need to find leads. We need to hygiene those leads. We need mailbox rotation. We need domain. What we know the things that we need to do. He's solving the problem of that for us in one platform. It still revolves around B2B outreach. That is the end goal of what he's building. That's the end goal of what I'm doing. But the more he can make it so I don't have to go to 7 different platforms, the same thing, the better. It's just actually easier for me, easier for him, easier for everybody.
And from the perspective of the client, so if you're, for example, one of your clients who hires your company to do the outreach for them, I think from the client's perspective, it's still important that the client has a good foundational knowledge of cold email, because I've always been skeptical of people who just want to completely outsource absolutely everything with zero understanding of whatever that thing is. I think you're always going to be in a better situation if you know a lot yourself. But the thing is just because you know a lot about something doesn't mean that you have the time or the will or the availability to actually execute on it yourself. So in those kinds of situations, obviously hiring a company like yours to sort of do the actual day-to-day work isn't, that can have a lot of benefits, because you might not have the time to do all the details, but you should still be able to understand them. So that might sound obvious to some people, but we get a lot of people who email us or message us, and they sort of somehow expect to just sort of click 1 or 2 buttons and just magically transform their business. And it's just, that's not how it works. You have to have a good knowledge, and then from there you can do what you need to do.
Yeah, I mean, I've had clients that, like you were saying, they have knowledge of cold email. They've been running cold email. Either they have sales teams, SDR teams, BDR teams, or they just do it themselves, but they've hit a ceiling, right? Their revenue they can't scale anymore. They keep trying to feed more leads into it to scale the volume, but the revenue's not scaling. And sometimes you just need a consultant that does this to maybe not take over the project, but just come in and do an audit and do a diagnostic test. What's going on? Check the sequence, look at the content, look at the strategy, look at the whole picture. I've done it plenty of times. I actually enjoy doing them because I get to work with people who understand what it is they're trying to do in cold email. And then I've also had people who they understand what cold email can do. They want to learn some, but they want me just to take it over and run it for them. But they have an understanding of what it is, what it can do, kind of how it works. I tell all my clients this simply: if you want me to manage your project, you have to do warming and you have to do hygiene. Otherwise, bother because it's going to break in 30 to 60 days. And you're going to be all upset that everything's going to spam. And you're going to be upset with me that you X amount of dollars, you're going to spam, you're not turning your revenue. When I told you from day one, if you don't clean your list and you don't warm your mailboxes to some extent, it's not. So I have to have people that can understand why I say that, right? I don't just say it because I think we need to spend more money. I say it because it's vital to any B2B outreach project that I do. And when I talk to clients who can understand it, even if they have some questions, it's a lot easier, right? The ones that want to just literally hire you to take over the entire industry, the entire project, the entire everything, and you do lead sourcing, you build the system, you run the system, you honor the system, you do the entire system, and you just hand them the leads to sell to, they're out there. There's a lot of projects like that out there. I don't personally enjoy working on them as much. I enjoy work communicating with the client, both of us being a part of the project. I could definitely take over more of the managed part, depending on what you need. But, you know, like you were saying, it's easier if the client understands what cold email is, what it can do. You don't need to know the ins and outs, but you need to know the basics.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting topic about, we have a set of brand new email accounts. People who don't understand cold email, they just want to, on day one, blast out as many emails as possible. But, in general, it's a good idea to have some kind of gradual build up on those new email accounts. Wait a little bit. It looks kind of, it's a little suspicious for a bunch of email accounts and domains to be created, and then within 1 or 2 days, they're all setting super high volume of emails. If you were an ESB like Gmail or Outlook, you would obviously, I guess one of the first things you would look at to determine whether these email accounts are good or not, basically. So some patience, I think, is important. Don't just expect to blast them out. Even have these accounts, these email accounts and domains set up ahead of time. If you're going to be launching campaigns in a few months, maybe set them up now. Have something going at low volume, and then when you're ready to go, we can kind of scale more quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. I tell most people if you haven't really done cold outreach before and you're not set up for it, and we're basically starting from scratch, we're looking at a minimum 30 to 45 days from day one until we send our first actual live outbound email. And if you come to me and say, Josh, that's not fast enough, I want to send it in 5 days, then we're just going to break the system. Are there ways to get around that? Are there little cheat codes that I know over time where we can kind of get a few emails out here or there in ways of doing it? Yes. Is it worth it? Usually not. You usually end up just breaking the system. So if you are starting from scratch, patience is huge, right? You're building a system for the long term. You want this to run month over month, year over year. Waiting 30 days or 45 days might seem like an eternity right now. But in 6 months, when it's running smoothly, itself, you'll be big because you started it the right way and you didn't try to rush through it. Where now in 3 months, you're either upset with me because we built a system that's going to spam, or you're reaching out to another consultant to do an audit, figure out why you're going to spam. You end up spending more money that way fixing it than if you just took the time to build it the right way. I can't tell you how many audits I've run for thousands of dollars on systems that have been running for 6 months and everything's going to spam. They're questioning. The first thing I look at is the age of the domain. When did you buy it? When did you start sending on it? When did you set up that mailbox, and how fast did you start sending on that? If you bought a domain and set up I bought a domain on day one, set up a mailbox on day two, and started sending on day three, not gonna work.
Yeah.
Right.
And then also adding to that, what's the bounce rate and what was the reply rate as well? Because if you have a super, super low reply rate and a relatively high bounce rate, even on the early stages, and then you scale from there, that's just a recipe for disaster. People are just.
Absolutely. And Google has put on new Google workspaces, and I know that Office has some stuff that they've added also, but Google has added stuff on brand new workspaces, not new domains, on existing workspace. But if you set up a brand new workspace right now, they are severely limiting how much you can output from every mailbox based on how many mailboxes you have, the overall volume. But I mean, I've run into it before with a brand new workspace with 1 or 2 domains on it, and I can't send more than 50 emails a day for 2 months solid. And that for those of you that only want to do 15 live, 20 live a day, that's under the 50. But if you're think about it, you're also warming. So if you're warming 25 or 30 a day and you're sending 25 or 30 a day, you start to hit those limits every day. And the more you hit that limit, the more you aggravate Google and the more they start to cause problems. They'll suspend mailboxes. They'll make it difficult. They'll stop sending behind the scenes, and it becomes really hard to come back from that.
Yeah. Final thing I'll say on that topic about Google and Microsoft sort of limiting the amount of emails you can send. If you set up a brand new Microsoft 365 email account, yeah, they have this thing. You probably know this, but I'm just saying it for anyone watching. They have this thing called the trial tenant. So when you set up that new Microsoft account, by default, you're on this trial tenant. Even if you're on the paid plan, you've already paid, that you're still on this trial tenant usually for the first 2 to 4 weeks, whatever the period is. And if you try to connect those email accounts to a cold email setting tool or any kind of sending automation tool, like Email Chaser or whatever tool, it basically automatically bounces your emails. And they're not hard bounces because they're not actually sending the emails in the first place, but Microsoft is basically not even letting you send those emails. So yeah, these are just things to be aware of. You cannot just set up a bunch of new email accounts and start blasting emails from day one. It's not gonna go well.
I always 100% any mailbox that I set up that's brand new, whether it's Google, Office, Cloud, third party, AWS, whatever it is, I wait from the time I set up the mailbox, I wait 24 hours to do anything. I might send one test email to myself just to make sure it's set up properly. The authentication is there. There's no issues as far as that goes. But I don't connect. I won't even connect it to email chaser. And if I'm not sent, I won't even connect it to it. I won't connect it to Warman. I won't connect it to any third party, anything. Because even if I'm not sending, there's still signals going back and forth. The more you log in from third party platforms, we do this. They call it anomalous sending patterns. That's what Office calls it. They start to catch on. So I want that mailbox to sit there. I want to start scaling it with warming slowly, starting at literally 2, 3, 4, 5 emails a day in warming and taking 30 days sometimes to get from 0 to 100 just in warming emails. I won't even send a live email till that's done most of the time. And then I take another 30 days to get from 0 to 100 with live emails. So if you're willing to be patient, take your time. Don't try to just set up, 1 or 20 mailboxes and start sending from them. It's going to break. Not worth the time, the energy. Most of the time, you're going to have to just scrap the whole thing. Easier, honestly, to scrap it and start over than to try to fix something.
Yeah, so and we've been talking here for a while now. I think we should probably wrap this up. For anyone watching who wants to get in contact with Josh and potentially hire his company to help with their cold email campaigns, I'm going to put Josh's LinkedIn profile in the description of this YouTube video. So just go down to the description and you'll find him there. And that's all I have to say. Do you have anything you want to wrap up with, or we good to go?
Feel free to reach out. Happy to just, if you have questions about your system or questions about cold outreach, if there's an easy way on my website, there's just a form to fill out. We can just start a conversation, talk for 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. If you just have some questions, free quick consultations just to see if one, you're having issues with cold outreach, or two, you need help with it, or maybe you just have some questions, can cold outreach work for me? We can just talk about strategy and if it's possible. So thank you, George. Had a great time today.
All right, I'll see you in the next episode. Thanks.